All right. So, hey everybody, welcome back. As some of you may have noticed, and thank you for those of you who are popping in the questions and making comments on this stuff. This is the season of consuming versus creating. Now, every season is the season of dealing with this. Every day is the opportunity to continue working through this process. But this is really the time of year where I find a lot of us default down to our unconscious habits. There's a really nice graphic I saw the other day, and it's the picture of the iceberg. And as I'm sure most of you know, less than 20%, according to this one, 10% of the iceberg is actually above the surface of the water. And what they were explaining with this image was the difference between the conscious and the subconscious of the individual, of us, of our behaviors. Because we think that we're thinking things a lot of the time, and we honestly believe that most of our thoughts are real. And what we're not aware of is that there are all these habits and patterns, these programs in the operating system that are really running the show. Now, some of that stuff is really good because homeostasis, for example, is super complicated. Like, I don't want to have the job to project manage making 300 to 500 billion new cells every day. I lose my car keys once every couple of weeks for 5 minutes. Like, if I had to make all those new cells reproduce, if I had to manage peristalsis and digestion and absorption and whatever else, never mind keeping a heart beating, it probably wouldn't go well. So a lot of those automatic things are fantastic and super important, and I just wouldn't survive without them. None of us would. But layered on top of that are a whole bunch of other unconscious habits, and they occur in the thinking levels of the brain, and they're thoughts that are repeated so often that they become beliefs, and beliefs that are followed so frequently that they become true. Extra big quotation marks there in terms of truth. It's pretty relative. I don't think truth exists. One of my favorite conversations about truth is that capital T truth cannot be understood or spoken by us. It's too big to fit inside our brains, our minds, probably even our hearts. So that being the case, why is this important? What am I here to deal with today? Well, I came across a quote earlier this morning, and it was from Lao Tzu, and it said that love is a decision, not an emotion. And I really let that hit me for a minute. And it's like, okay, I get that, but let me think about this piece of decision for a moment. Right? One of the big things they talk about in the personal development world is the difference between a decision and a choice. And seeing as language is part of how our brains and minds operate, it's important to pause a little bit and examine this, right? Just like slow everything down and really take a look at this. So it's okay to say that love is a decision, not an emotion. And I think that's really important. I think it's the basic version of this, because if you are in or out, and it shouldn't be based on your feelings. It should be based on your commitment. But then we get to the difference between a choice and a decision. So to decide is understood as eliminating things, cutting things away. Whereas a choice is taking two things and picking one. And in my opinion, the practice of applying your intention onto love is both. It's actually both. It's not one or the other. And this is one of the main things that I got out of spending some time thinking about this, is how quickly we eliminate things instead of examining them and really spending some time taking a look at it. So let's look at decision for a minute, because again, in the context of consuming versus creating and the work that I do with clients, with friends, with relationships, with family, it's something that I just practice everywhere. Doing that which you love is the thing to focus on. When we're looking at automating or putting systems in place or consulting for a client, we actually only help them do more of that which they love. You know, it may take 100 things a month to run a business. And if there's only 20 of those that are what are loved, then before you make that business double what it already is, you need to clean that stuff up. You need to take a look at what you do love, because if you unconsciously just build more, then you get 40 things you love next month and 160 things you don't. So this is one of the primary factors in this practice. And, you know, I make myself responsible for that when I work with my clients, because it needs to be handled before you get more of anything. And so this is where that decision part comes in that I think is really valuable, the cutting away. Because again, if we use this example, there are 100 things you need to do every month to run your business, 20 of which you love, 80 of which you don't. Why not get rid of the 10 or 15 or 20 that don't have to be there in the first place, that literally don't need to exist, and they're just done out of habit because we think we need to do them, not because they're actually a factor in the business running. So that's one of the first things I examine. I give her credit for making it understandable and recently more popular, but like just Marie Kondo, your life and your business. Strip away, decide, cut off and remove the things that A, are not what you love, and B, completely unnecessary. It's like barnacles on a boat. It's just drag on your life, just increases friction, and it's something that doesn't actually have to be there. So that's step one. Let's say we've removed like 20 items and we're down to 80, 20 of which you love, 60 of which you don't. Now we can get into the choosing. Now you can look at these two things and be like, I love this part of my business. In fact, if you take that away from me, I'll quit. But then there's this other thing, which is like, I don't exactly love that, but it's a necessity of function. It is a factor that must happen for my business to operate. My opinion, find someone who loves it. Find someone who loves it and make it their thing. Bring them on board as a member of your team, or maybe they are a systems thinker like me, or an automation expert like some of the people that I work with. Hand it over to them. They might not love doing it day to day, but they might love setting up a system so that it happens easily, seamlessly, and without any friction. And it's just done for you because it is a necessity, but not a necessity by your own labor. And this is really important to understand, because when we're dealing with creating and consuming, if you don't do that, you end up in what I call a cycle of consumption. And you can see that out there because, you know, I'm going to use a quote from somebody I had a meeting with a couple of weeks ago. This guy is an up and comer. He's a brilliant, thoughtful human being, and he's building his business his second time around. He was focusing on abundance. And so he built an abundance model. He created a product. He got it out in front of a bunch of people. He even made some money doing it. But he realized that the people he'd attracted loved this guy's language. He called it stuff worth versus self-worth, right? They were consumers. All of their value was based in having more shit because they weren't aligned. And so because of that, they were just seeking for outside validation. And he found that he was perpetuating the myth of more, which, you know, is my language, not his. But we had an agreement about this. And that's what made me excited to get into a conversation with this person. He respected his alignment enough to do that first year of business, realize that this was happening, and shut the whole thing down and start over. Because he wanted to serve people who were committed to internal referencing, to their value and their worth coming from their own alignment and coming from inside themselves. And it takes a lot of courage to separate yourself from an income stream and say, this doesn't fit for me. And that's another one of those decisions. But again, he put himself out of consumption into a creative space and gave himself an opportunity to create much more by working on his alignment first. And so I really do respect that and think that it is an example of what is possible for any one of us. And I welcome you all to figure out what that is for you and follow it. Right? This is the perfect time of year to look at that stuff because, again, a lot of our defaults and our unconscious habits come up. Everybody goes a little bit crazy. It's why, half the people spend December drinking. It's not quite celebratory as much as just shoving depressants in there because all of our latent patterning starts to show up, right? It's near the end of the year and like, oh, have I gotten as far as I should? And, oh, I'm triggered by my family or my friends, or, oh, it's all about consuming because everything's about Black Friday and companies don't even make money until this time of year. And our society's just a little psychologically sick with this stuff. And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't have to be. It's a choice, right? You can go between the two things. Every Christmas movie is about that, right? It's about realigning with your values and finding your heart again and realizing that it doesn't have to be stuff. And that goes right back to Scrooge and Charles Dickens. This is a hundreds of years old story. So you know that this is the truth. You know that you have a choice, and you know that you can move ahead and just cut away the things that are unnecessary weight, that are dragging you down and holding you back. And then after doing that first iteration, eliminating the waste and the clutter, you can work on it a second time. And for me, this is your project for at least the first quarter, if not the rest of next year. It's okay to take a year to do this, by the way. But really keep on checking in and seeing what is and isn't a fit for you and start making your choices, right? After you make the decisions and you cut stuff away, make those choices. Go in and take the stuff that isn't most desirable, most what you love, most aligned for you, and find a way to get it done that isn't by your labor. So all of your energy is going to that which you do love. As I promise you, as you start to take steps in this direction, a whole bunch of stuff unfolds in front of you, right? It's back to that Goethe quote. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy. Boldness has genius in it. Begin it now. That's 3 out of the 5 or 8 sentences. And he really nails it. And I'm sure it makes a lot more sense when you read it top to bottom. But the fact of the matter is you can begin it now. Be well. Thank you for your time. I'll see you again.